Todd McShay at ESPN.com has unveiled his latest mock draft for the upcoming draft, which would be in 2021. And there are a few really interesting notes here in McShay's most recent mock draft. At the top of the draft, there's no surprise. Trevor Lawrence, the quarterback from Clemson, he has going number 1 overall. Maybe a bit of a surprise to some is he's got the Washington football team. Still odd to say. Taking Patrick Surtain out of Alabama with the number 2 overall pick. So Lawrence 1, Surtain 2. It's just rare to see a cornerback go that high, right? We saw Jeff Okudah go 3 to Detroit this past year, but you have to be just an exceptional outlier to see that. So he had Lawrence going 1. He had Surtain going 2 to the Washington football team. So that would be the first SEC player off the board. Penei Sewell going 3 to the Bengals. That would obviously provide some blindside help for Joe Burrow, who would then be entering his second year. And you'd pair him with 2019 first-rounder Jonah Williams, who's a left tackle at Alabama, who spent all of last year injured, and he would be back. 4, Justin Fields going to the Carolina Panthers. So Teddy Bridgewater, we know, signed there in the offseason, and they are in a full-on rebuild. Fields, though, could be their franchise. And then 1 pick later is where you see, coming off the board, LSU wide receiver Ja'Marr Chase. So number 5 overall to the Miami Dolphins is where Todd McShay mocks Ja'Marr Chase, and he writes, "I'll start by saying that if Sewell were available, he'd be the pick. Even after Miami drafted Austin Jackson and Robert Hunt with early picks in April, protecting Tua is still the team's top priority. With Sewell off the block for Burrow in Cincinnati, let's help Tagovailoa another way. Chase is the best available prospect here and a true number 1 wideout, but he also fills a glaring need for the Dolphins. Devontae Parker had a breakout season with more than 1,200 receiving yards, but the next most productive Dolphin wide receiver in 2019 was Preston Williams at 428. And then he goes on to talk about Chase's stats and being an elite producer. So Ja'Marr Chase at 5 to Miami illustrates a couple of things. Number 1, what we know, that he's the best receiver in the draft. Number 2, what we know, that he's a top 10 talent. Number 3, Ja'Marr Chase doesn't need to play football in 2020. So actually, none of those 5 guys I just mentioned need to play football in 2020. But for Sewell at Oregon and Fields at Ohio State, the rest of the top 5 would play with Trevor Lawrence, Patrick Surtain, and Ja'Marr Chase. He's got Micah Parsons, the linebacker from Penn State, going 6, and Parsons, of course, Penn State's not playing because the Big Ten is not playing, but Parsons was one of the ones that already declared that he was going to sit out. As you kind of scroll the rest of the top 25, what stands out to me the most is the lack of an overwhelming SEC top 10 or top 25. As a matter of fact, of the 32 picks in round 1, a quarter of them are from the SEC. 8 of the 24, or 8 of the 32 are from the SEC. 4 from Bama, 2 from LSU, 1 from Tennessee, that's Trey Smith, the offensive lineman, and 1 from South Carolina with Israel Mukuamu, the cornerback, who they have going 29 to San Francisco. If you're wondering about the other LSU prospect that they have going in round 1, it is Tyler Shelvin that Todd McShay mocks number 19 overall to the Tennessee Titans. So what an awesome opportunity for Tyler Shelvin, who has had an up-and-down time at LSU. Didn't qualify academically his first year, so he took a red shirt. Wasn't in great shape. Took him a long time in 2018 to get on the field. Then last year really had a breakout season, and now is projected by everybody to be a first-round draft pick and an All-America candidate. So the 2 LSU prospects that McShay mocks in round 1, Ja'Marr Chase 5 overall to Miami, and then Tyler Shelvin 19 to the Tennessee Titans. If I were to sort of guess as what other LSU prospects might be in the market to be first-round draft picks, the most obvious one to me would be Terrace Marshall. If Marshall has a big year, then you could see a run as the value of elite wide receivers go up. If you could find an elite wide receiver late in round 1, the Saints could be a team late in round 1 looking for an elite wide receiver. Marshall makes a lot of sense. Jabril Cox is the other one that if he can have a year and elevate this year on a national stage with increased competition the way that say, Patrick Queen did in 2019, Jabril Cox could be a guy that you see go sneak his way into round one at some point for a team that's looking for linebacker help. For example, the Patriots at 26, McShay has them taking Dylan Moses out of Alabama. Well, if it comes down to Moses or Cox, and Moses has the knee injury in the past, Cox did tear his ACL in high school, in his junior year of high school, but perhaps that could be an option there. The other would be Jacoby Stevens. And I think Jacoby Stevens has the opportunity, if he can prove to be an elite edge rusher, run defender, and a safety that can defend the pass, that's a guy that could sneak his way into the end of round one. Typically, you don't see safeties go in round one unless if you were talking about like transcendent type players like a Jamal Adams. You'll typically see other elite safeties go in round two, like we saw with Grant Delpit, or like we saw with Marcus Williams when the Saints took Marcus Williams in round two. That could be a possibility, a more reasonable possibility for Jacoby Stevens, unless he has a blow-up year, 100 tackles, half a dozen sacks, 10 tackles for loss, flash plays in big moments. Like that could be something that really catapults Jacoby Stevens because of his versatility on the defensive side. If you're wondering about the New Orleans Saints, McShay does have the Saints going wide receiver at the end of round one, and he's got them going picking 31st overall. So has the Saints ultimately losing the Super Bowl to the Kansas City Chiefs. But at 31 overall, he's got the Saints taking Charleston Rambo, the wide receiver out of Oklahoma. So incredibly, he's got a quarter of his round one picks. 8 of his round one picks are wide receivers, but he's got the Saints going wide receiver with Charleston Rambo. I just want to see how this offense looks with Emmanuel Sanders, and I'm desperate to see if any of the young wide receivers make a leap this year. Does Traquan finally do it, or are you writing him off? Could one of those undrafted free agents, if it's Emmanuel Butler, if it's little Jordan Humphrey, is it Marquez Callaway out of Tennessee, can one of those guys take that step and become a consistent weapon? If so, the need for a wide receiver diminishes, but otherwise, this is a way to get potentially an elite playmaker opposite Mike Thomas on an inexpensive rookie deal. So I wouldn't hate it, knowing what I know right now, if the Saints go wide receiver. But the other very realistic possibility for New Orleans in 2021, you're going to need a quarterback. And the Saints are notorious for trading up. If there's a quarterback in this draft outside of Fields and Lawrence that they love, that they're willing to move up 10 spots, 15 spots to get, that would not surprise me at all if there was a guy sitting there somewhere in the teens that they felt like they could snag. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.